All right. So, good evening, everyone. I hope that you all are doing well. My name is Takiwa Smith. I'm founder and executive director of Science, Engineering, Mathematics Link, and I want to welcome you to our closing ceremony and podcast reveal for okay, give me one second. So we are here because um, we've had students spend several months doing things that I didn't even want to do in high school. It is engage in um, scholarly endeavors to make themselves better outside of school time, to spend time learning what is a valuable skill, um, STEM literacy and communication skills, which is something that is often overlooked when we think about what is needed and what skills need to be developed to become a STEM professional. We think of the laboratory, we think of the classroom, but do we think really like how do we learn, read, and communicate STEM not only to our peers and to the general public? And so I am very, very proud. We started off with 15. We ended up with like 8 or 9 and students, and then we ended up with 5 students that successfully completed by doing everything, which was recording their podcast episodes. And so, although we do appreciate those students who made it to the end and did all of the classes and read all the journals, that is important. But I also think the podcast was like the icing on the cake because that's where we learn, in which STEM professionals don't always learn how to do, is communicate their STEM to the general public. And so I couldn't be more prouder of those students. So I'm going to give a little history. Why did my video go away? Okay, give a little history of SEM Link, the STEM Journal Club, and then I'm going to let Dr. Williams talk a little bit about the curriculum. Then we're going to hear some inspiring words from our speaker, Dr. Tiara Bells. I forgot to get your bio, Dr. Bells, so we just gonna let you introduce yourself.
That's perfectly fine.
Okay. And then we're going to end with what um, we've all been waiting on. Dr. Watley is going to give us behind the scenes footage of the podcast recording, as well as a preview of the podcast episodes, which she's going to put on our Sim Explain channel. And so, SEM Link is an organization that was started in 2005 that I started because I wanted students to have an opportunity to pursue STEM careers. And I knew that an important part of that was meeting and interacting with the STEM community, which is why our name is SEM Link. And so during the pandemic, we kind of shifted our program to some digital programming. And one of the things that I wanted to do was I realized we support STEM fairs. And I realized a lot of students who had great experimentation, especially kids that look like me and look like you all in this journal club, were not doing well on their science fair projects. And it wasn't because the experimentation, it was because their background research wasn't strong. They didn't know what STEM discipline they were studying. They got their resources from Google, which is why, thank you, Ms. Douglas Williams Tyre, for coming. That's why we start the program with a STEM library to teach kids where to get scholarly resources. And so I thought that the best way that we could encourage STEM research is start from the beginning, start from where do students know where to do research? What are scholarly resources and sources? And it's especially important in this age of misinformation, disinformation, for students to know that. The second part is why that's fine. We had the communication component, because how many of you have met STEM professionals who like they shouldn't be talking to nobody? And it's not a matter of you not understanding their STEM discipline, because I have been very confused by some good communicators because that's just not my expertise, right? I don't know physics, I don't know astronomy. But having people who you're like, man, you just stuck in a lab somewhere in front of your computer and you don't talk to anybody. And we wanted to make sure that a lot of the disinformation and misinformation starts because we as STEM professionals don't communicate our science well to the general public. And that is why we did the podcast. And so from October to April, these students every week, every month have been reading a different journal article, which if you all are STEM professional, you know this, like I didn't get my first journal article to sophomore year. Nobody told me how to read it. My research mentor was like, here, you got to read this journal article, before you touch my fancy, expensive equipment in the lab. And that's it. And so one of the things that we get to know and we have learned, because this is our sixth cohort of the Journal Club, is that when students learn how to read scientific journals, it teaches them skills where they can learn on their own. It teaches them how valuable skills that will help their success when they go to college. We've seen that from our previous cohorts, and it's a valuable skill. And so I just want to congratulate these students again because, like we said, in high school, I know I wouldn't have done a journal club. I was trying to kick it, work, and make some money to do, shenanigans with my friends. And so I'm going to move on. I'm going to have Dr. Williams, John Williams, who's our program coordinator, program director, to talk a little bit about the curriculum, how it was designed, and including things such as our guest lecture series.
Thank you. So, first of all, scholars, let me tell you, this has been a fun ride, and I am really, really proud of you all. The amount of engagement that you all gave in the meetings that I was in, as well as what I heard from the speakers, really impressed me. Especially with students like Ms. Smith said, when we were in high school, we weren't necessarily introduced to these types of things, and so with every generation they started advancing and moving it forward. And you all are actually ahead of the curve because you got a chance to understand how science is communicated and how scientific research is written, communicated, and how it's actually spread to the masses. And of course, we think that's very important in today's times because too often we rely on others to digest science for us, but we want you to have the skills to be able to do that. With that being said, the curriculum was designed to do a couple of things. One, to teach you how to use resources in order to help break down scientific information. And so we went through things like Google Notebook LM, a couple of other platforms that allow you to really digest information and help you to determine definitions, help you determine concepts, and to break those things down so that it is more palatable as you are reading through these articles. We also had the library session where it taught you how to find resources, how to locate reputable resources, and how to match those resources with the things that you are looking up and the things that you are researching. And then we had our wonderful speakers. Now, I have to say this, but the bulk of those speakers that we brought on were people that we know, that we trust to be able to deliver information to you all. So they weren't just random people. We actually brought people in that we know would be able to really engage you. And hopefully you all enjoyed speaking with them, especially gleaning information from their knowledge as well. And we picked them strategically in different areas so that you could see pretty much the full gamut of what science can be. Too often we get stuck on just medical research or just engineering research, but we wanted you to see everything. So astrophysics, genetics, environmental science. We did some things with endocrinology. We did some things with biology. And so we wanted you to see all of the science fields because ultimately, when you are more informed, then you make more informed decisions and you have more options as to what your career could look like. And so we hope that you enjoyed the curriculum. We hope you enjoyed the speakers, but most of all, we hope that you enjoyed this entire process because this is something that will help make your future as future scientists because we want all of you to be scientists if that's what your passion is. We hope that this will help to make your give you that jump start that you need to start looking towards your future as a STEM professional. And so with that being said, I'm going to turn it back over. But again, thank you all for being as engaged as you all have been. We are very, very proud of you.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. And one of the things that we added the guest lecture, and we were intentional because we wanted people that could be role models to you on your STEM journey because you all asked great questions with to them about their own journey. I don't think my video wants to work. And so there it is. And so one of the reasons I'm going to turn it over to our keynote speaker. So one of the reasons I am bringing Dr. Bills in as our keynote speaker, and I meant to bring her as a guest lecture, but I'm like, dang it, I forgot. Um, one of the things that is so important about research and STEM research is that we can use it to solve problems and make our communities better. And that is one of the things that Dr. Bills does in her research as a civil engineer. And she is
That's
also a
right.
FAMU alumna, right?
That's right.
And she is currently an assistant professor at
That-
University of California at Los Angeles. And I think you're in two departments, right?
That's right. So I have an appointment in civil and environmental engineering and public policy, the public affairs school.
Yeah, and so one of the things that I brought her in because I've been watching her research, and she has done a great job mentoring people. And but sometimes when we think, why do we need you to do scientists? Why is it important for scientists that look like us to be in science? Dr. Bills is a perfect example because when scientists are diverse and STEM professionals, we solve more problems because there is no one experience in this country. And we also know that certain zip codes, certain neighborhoods, and policy decisions impact our quality of life, right? And secondly, reminder that science is STEM, engineering, all of that isn't some abstract thing. When we STEM touches our everyday life, whether you are a STEM professional or not, it impacts us. And that's one of the things that Dr. Bills does in her research and tries to solve problems that impacts the world and certain communities, but especially people that look like her in her own community. And the beauty of especially a lot of our scientists were PhDs. Um, and we did that intentionally, not because, you have different journeys to become a STEM professional. You don't necessarily have to get a PhD, but the beauty of when you get a PhD is a lot of times you get to choose your research and how you want to make an impact. And so that's why we brought a lot of PhDs in. So without further ado, I'm going to let Dr. Bills go ahead and speak to you all.
Thank you so much. Um, I did prepare a few slides, just three. I think for me, it's really nice to have some visual aid. So I'll try to, basically I'll talk, a bit longer on each of the slides rather than having a slide for each point. So I'm going to share my screen. Um, Here we go. Okay, hang on here. 1 second. Okay. All right. Can you see my presentation? Oops. Where'd you go? All right. How's that? Okay. So good evening, everyone. It's afternoon my time, but good evening. First, I want to say it's an honor to be talking with you all, and I want to thank Takiwa for reaching out and extending this invitation. It's always a wonderful experience, and it's great for me to be able to speak with the youth and actually use terms like the youth. When for me, it feels like not too long ago, I was, in your shoes, and I was being poured into by by mentors and community members, teachers, elders in the family. And so I always feel like it's an honor for me to kind of step in that role and try to play that role for you all who are future scientists, engineers, scholars, and leaders. Um, so I thought a lot about, what I could say that would be encouraging to you. And I have three things that I want to talk about. I want to start and talk a little bit about myself. And this is something that I always try to do, like at the beginning of my classes. I have a self-introduction, and I'll tell you, about where I'm from and, sort of how my journey has contributed to where I am now. And then I'll also tell you about what I do, the type of work that I do, and I'll give you an overview. I try to talk about some of the technical aspects and the motivations for what I do. And I'm going to try and integrate experiences and perspectives, um, or how I have tried to integrate experiences and perspectives into the very sort of research and technical ideas that I aim to contribute. And my hope is that this discussion is not only going to be about encouraging you to study and continue along this journey in STEM, but to, impress upon you about the power of communication, and the power of integrating your own voice, your own authentic experiences into the work that you do, and the power of being able to express what you are doing and what you are learning to a broader audience. So I'll start with my self-introduction, and this is my little timeline. So I was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, and I was, I'll say two things. So one is that growing up in Detroit, I was involved in the arts. And so, my first love was for the arts. I was a singer in my church choir, and I sang in a community arts program in high school. I was involved in dancing. So I studied West African dance from like the age of 3 all the way up until adulthood. And so I was heavily involved in the arts in Detroit. And I did well academically. So I did well, particularly in math and science. Um, and when I was in high school, I thought either I would be an architect, um, or I would be a veterinarian because I loved animals. So really didn't know what I wanted to be. I know that I didn't want to be a teacher, which is kind of ironic. My mom is like a 40-year middle and elementary school teaching veteran, and I grew up sort of being her assistant. I would be in the classrooms, helping to curate the classrooms, helping to set up the spaces, helping to prepare the materials for students. And I just, said to myself, this is not the life that I want for me. Um, so, I say that to say, hindsight is better than foresight. I think while perhaps I did not appreciate at the time the work that goes into educators creating creating environments for learning. So I didn't really like that part because it was a lot of work, right? But what I do appreciate is from that experience is learning about, how important it is and what it really takes to teach and to create learning opportunities for students. And so this is something that I think has really stuck with me, even though at the time I didn't realize I was taking away these things. I think another important thing about growing up in Detroit for me is that I saw the importance of transportation systems. Um, And even at the time, even though I had no idea what a transportation engineer was or that, this is something that could have been a possibility for me, I understood very well that places where communities had reliable and accessible public transportation systems where they did not have to rely on automobiles, these were also places where opportunities were more accessible, where people seemed to live a better quality of life. Being involved in the arts, I got to travel to cities like Chicago and DC. And it was very clear to me that, wow, if we had these things in Detroit, then we can get to these places that we want to get to. We can get to these jobs, in a reliable fashion. We can connect with community in a reliable fashion, and this would bring a higher quality of life to our city. So this is something that I think, again, fast forward was a strong motivator and a strong connection to this idea of the value of transportation and understanding, needs, right? Like why it's important to have good transportation systems. So I did my undergraduate study at Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University, so Florida A&M, FAMU. And, I'm a proud FAMU alumni. And I majored in civil engineering. So I'll tell you that civil engineering technology was not my first degree program. I started out in architecture. And in my first year, participating in those initial architecture courses where we're really just learning the basics of how to draw, how to express certain objects using, drawing and other media. Um, I felt that I wanted to do something more than focus on the aesthetic aspect of places or infrastructure. I felt that I wanted to learn how to build buildings and houses. I wanted to learn how to make sure that the building can stand up and support people, in the structure. So, talking to mentors and advisors, I sort of stumbled upon civil engineering. So I enrolled right away. I began to enjoy the courses and the coursework. I also had the opportunity to work with who was the program director at the time. His name was Dr. Charles Wright, and he's no longer with us, but he was the director of the civil engineering technology program, and he had a research group um, focusing on transportation research. So I started thinking, oh, maybe I'll do structural and construction and focus on, building infrastructure. But I quickly gravitated towards transportation by virtue of being involved in his research group. So I want to, move on to, some of these other aspects, but I think that my time at FAMU was very formative because of this research opportunity. And this is really where I started to learn the value of these diverse perspectives that we just talked about. So um, I was able to participate in Dr. Wright's research group where we were studying traffic safety. Okay, we were studying what we called traffic safety interventions or safety restraints, right? Seatbelts save lives, right? Everyone buckle up. At the time, it was clear that young people, young adults, were and this might still be the case, were most likely um, to die in a car crash due to lack of safety restraint, right? I'll just say quickly, this safety restraint, a seatbelt, it seems second nature right now, but at a time, cars, there was a time where cars did not have seatbelts. And we know that in the event that there is a traffic incident, you are much safer and you're more likely to live and recover if you are kept inside of the vehicle, right? So if you happen to have a crash and you fly outside of the vehicle, there's a much higher chance of injury and death. So we were studying really how to, what were the drivers of wearing safety restraints among young people? What are the barriers of wearing safety restraints to young people? And to try and make this more succinct, this was my opportunity to learn about the value of research and the value of sort of just bringing my perspective to the table. We were looking at the available literature on what are the drivers and barriers of using safety restraints. And I started to notice that we don't really have a whole lot of information available in the literature. So reading those same types of articles that you guys have been reviewing, we don't have a lot from their perspectives, right? We have a lot of researchers who are doing surveys, and they're looking at crash data, and they're coming up with sort of, at the time it felt like these were hypotheses. Like it was natural to me to want to understand from the perspective of these travelers, these young adults, what would they say was their motivation or their barrier to using safety restraint. So this led me to do a survey on campus. This was a part of my undergraduate thesis research, where I put together a survey and I went classroom to classroom and I had workshops. At the time, had no idea how to do a survey. I was just starting out as a sophomore and then junior student in my program doing this work. And so, no idea about these methods that many researchers spend a long time learning about, right? Like survey data collection. It can be a very sophisticated process, and rightfully so, because it's very hard to capture information in this way. So I was not an expert. I just sort of put together some questions about asking students, what is your age and where you're from, and some basic demographic information. And then asking them, whether they, regularly use safety restraint, sort of like sometimes, all the time, so you give them some options. And then also ask them open response questions about, what do you think motivates you to use your safety restraint? And if you don't, what do you think is the barrier? And what I'll say is that I learned in that case that students who did use their safety restraint most often, they didn't really think about their likelihood of being injured or in a car crash and perhaps dying, but they thought what they thought motivated them was about how their them being injured would impact their families and how life for their family would be if they were not there. That was the single strongest motivator that I observed through that survey. So, why am I telling you this, story about the work that I did? It was because what I learned from that experience beyond, what it means to do research and what it looks like to do research was that, you know, I spent a year reading all of these articles, right? And, I was able to identify what seemed to be this gap after spending, you can do a literature review much faster these days. Back then, we had to search for the paper, print it out, read it, mark it up. So, it took a year to do this literature review, and I was able to identify this gap and then um, put together some sort of plan to learn more information. And, this was something that I probably should have published. I didn't know a whole lot about publishing articles back then, but um, this was, what I understood as a very real contribution to a field, even as a sophomore student, as a junior, leading up and going into my senior year. Someone who does not have a degree and, knows only, the only thing I know about surveys is through my experience, and through trial and error. So I had a contribution to make, simply by bringing, you know, these perspectives from students on campus, to this problem of understanding the drivers of seatbelt safety and safety restraints. So I think, this kind of lit a spark for me. And in hindsight, I think this was really a formative period and me understanding the power of, um, what I and others can bring to the table, the power of unique perspectives being at the table. So, like Takiwa said before, we're able to solve more complex problems if we have more diverse perspectives at the table, looking at the same problem from different angles. Okay, bringing your unique perspectives and experiences to the problem. Okay. So let me move on. I have some other things here. So I did my graduate study at UC Berkeley. So I left Tallahassee and moved to California, the Bay Area, and I got a civil engineering degree, master's and PhD with a concentration in transportation. And it was there where, of course, I learned additional uh, technical concepts about how transportation works, how people make transportation choices, approaches for you know uh, designing systems, and what I learned. I'll just say two things. What I learned is that one, I seem to have had a knack for almost diagnosing issues, right? So I was in class learning about all of these different sides of developing transportation systems. How do we evaluate them? How do we understand the benefits of transportation services on communities? Are they going to make it easier to get to the places where people need to go? How do we think about those things? How do we develop models and tools for assessing, um, impacts of building these systems in communities? So I was learning these techniques, but at the same time, I was very aware of the prevalence of things like transit dependency. So that certain communities had to rely on transit because they did not have access to automobiles, didn't have access to a car. Um, and, I'm not exactly sure where each and every one of you is from, but in most places in the United States, if you don't have a car, then you're really out of luck. It really does require for you to have access to a car to get to your important destinations like to work, to the grocery store, to healthcare services, to school. To get there reliably, you need to have access to a car if you're not living in a transit-rich environment. And so what I saw is that those who are most likely to have to depend on transit were also those who look like me. They look like you and me. And so, study after study, class after class, we're learning these techniques that kind of suggest that everyone has, the same type of experiences. But then on the other hand, I'm looking at these outcomes and I'm thinking about, my own experiences and my family's experiences. And, there's a gap between these things, right? And so, in graduate school, this is where I developed an interest in something that's called transportation equity. And this is the idea that um, when we develop transportation systems, it's critical that those systems um, are able to benefit those with the greatest need, right? The places where you want to have excellent transit service, we want to have excellent transit services everywhere, but the places where we really need to focus on are places where people are the most vulnerable. They don't have access to a car. They have, maybe not the best employment and education outcomes because they can't regularly get to these places. Or the places that you really want to reach are so spread out that the only way to get there is a car, but you don't have access to a car. So these are the places where um, government and local agencies should be focusing. And this is, this is also something that was not being taught necessarily in the classroom. So, um, what I want you to take away from this is that, you know, being in this space, it presents a real opportunity for you to reflect on um, the value that you have in addressing really hard questions, even if you think that, oh, this has been around for such a long time and these are the scholars. No, the reality is that you have a real opportunity to solve problems, to look at problems in a way that no one else has looked at them before, and solve that problem in a way that's not only um, a solution for everyone, but it's also a solution for people from your community as well. Okay. I wanted to quickly get through this and then talk a little bit about what I do. And I'm looking at the clock, and I feel like I've already sort of used up a bunch of the time. After graduate school, I worked in industry as a research scientist at IBM, and I moved to Kenya. So I went and worked in their Nairobi, Kenya lab for 3 years, which is an excellent experience. And I wish I had more time to talk about it. After 3 years, I realized that I really wanted to come back to academia. And so I landed at University of Michigan. I think I was also trying to make my way back home. So I landed at University of Michigan. I did that for 3 years. Then I spent some time as a assistant professor at Wayne State, which is in Detroit. And I thought, thank God I'm at home. Um, and this position at UCLA came around, and the rest is kind of history. So I'm here at UCLA, and I have a lab that's called the Transportation Equity Innovation Lab. And we focus, on this idea that solving problems for a broad set of needs requires innovation. It requires innovation in the tools that we use, and it requires innovation in the very systems that we design. So I want to close with with this sort of final story about um, you know communication, right? So most academics, like has been mentioned before, you know, I love to talk about the work that I do, right? And I love to talk about its complexity, right? I think sometimes academics, they actually somehow they gain some sort of value or confidence from talking about complex things that no one else understands. Um, and so so I can talk for days about what I do, but what I have learned is that in this world that we live in, the people who are making decisions, the people who tend to have the most power, they are often not those who are the technical experts. So you have technical experts over here, and then you have, the people who are perhaps in government or practitioners who are helping things, helping sort of the wheels of the world turn. And the reality is that in order for us to meet our objectives and make sure that we can deliver um, in my case, deliver transportation services that address the needs of society. I understand, the distribution of those impacts across society. In order for me to do that, I need to be able to communicate, what can be very complex issues and analyses and results. I have to be able to distill that to uh, to a broader audience, people who are working in other disciplines and who are not the technical experts, but they are the ones who will write the legislation to invest the funding in the way that we need it to be invested in. So, you know, this is, really what I want to leave you with, and I think that this is something that kind of goes without saying. I want you to I want to encourage you first to continue along this path of um, of exploring STEM areas of interest, right? And as you continue along this journey, I hope that you will remember that you are uniquely positioned to solve the world's problems. By adding your unique and authentic perspectives to the table, um, you can address things in a way that have not been addressed before in a more um, robust way. Um, and the second is that as you continue along your academic journey and you continue to study these methods, study them hard, study them well, study them deeply, but also remember to practice sharing that knowledge as broadly as you can. I think that, and this is probably something that other STEM academics would tell you, it gets to a point where it might even be hard to communicate with family, right? Because you're spending all of your time focusing on these very complex concepts that most people won't have the time or exposure to understand. So, even in that case, it's really important for you to try. Imagine that you are trying to explain what you're doing to a child, right? And make this a regular part of your practice. Um, so really that's all I want to say. I hope that you will remain encouraged to continue this journey. Congratulations to you. I think that if you can continue doing those things, recognizing your unique power that you have in addressing the world's problems and continuing to practice communicating what you learn to a broad audience, I think if you can do those two things, then your future will be very bright. So I appreciate again you all having me. I did intend to talk through some additional slides, but I'll leave it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Fields. Does anyone have any questions for Dr. Fields, especially the young scholars? Now, I do have one question, and I'm sure they'll come up with it because they always got questions. With your current research, um, how does your background help with, because all of us, all the students are in Metro Atlanta, and we know Metro Atlanta has a lot of transportation issues, infrastructure issues. How does your perspective and your research, the engineering connect with the policy to
Hmm.
help those transportation solutions?
Yeah, it's a good question. And you know what? I'm gonna take this as an opportunity to show one of my slides because I didn't get a chance to do this. So hang on one second. Here we go. So where do we go? Here we go. Okay. So let's see here. I need to put this in presentation mode. Anyway, so my point I want to make is that so in transportation, things work a little differently than they do in other engineering disciplines because there's a natural connection to public investment. So we have researchers who are coming up with, you know, ways to design systems that are going to connect people to the places that where they need to go. They're going to be focusing on, evaluating impacts. How do, the availability of transit services and electric vehicles and new forms of mobility, how do these things benefit communities? How do we design policies that are going to support access to different markets, like access to electric vehicles, right? How do we design what this electric vehicle incentive package should look like in order to get more people access to the electric vehicle market. So things like that. So there's sort of these natural connections, but also it's important to reflect that in transportation and civil engineering disciplines, government agencies have a major role in actually building and managing and operating the infrastructure. And so, unlike in other engineering disciplines, perhaps in maybe mechanical or even in some cases in computer science, there's a larger focus on industry and advancing technology. They're going to be sold as products. But for civil engineering, our main focus is how do we build public infrastructure? How do we build roads? How do we build transportation networks? How do we build different types of systems? And so, so that's what I would say is that there's this sort of natural connection because of, you know, uh, the role that public agencies play in building the infrastructure. Therefore, researchers are really focused on how do we advance technology, methods, evaluation processes that are going to help these agencies and decision makers facilitate. And then the last thing I'll see is about policy is that, the way that we fund major infrastructure is in large due to legislation and decisions that Congress makes when they appropriate a budget for the infrastructure bill. um, all of this really relies on, estimates and forecasts and evaluations that are conducted by researchers as well as public practitioners.
That's
So
great.
I hope that makes sense.
That makes sense. I wish we could see
And
your
I'm seeing
slide.
this. Can you see my slide? So I'm
We
showing you.
It's not in slideshow mode, so we
Oh,
can see.
okay. Hang on here.
Okay.
Um, what about that? Does that work?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm showing you this because I got an opportunity when I was at Wayne State to be featured in a coloring book. So the coloring book is called Color Me PhD. And so actually, if you go to that URL, colormephd.org, you'll see that there are several of these coloring books. And the long story short is that the objective is to do what we are talking about, which is to help facilitate communication of what PhDs and engineers and scientists do to a broader community, a broader audience. And so I was honored to be featured back in 2021, and this is my page. It's in the second volume of their coloring book, and it kind of is a visual illustration of what I do. So I'm the researcher here. I'm developing these models that are like building blocks, right? Um, of what impacts transportation. So if you think about all the things that guide your decision of what, how to travel and what mode to take, you're thinking about the time of day, how long it's going to take to get there, the purpose, right? Whether you're going to school or going, to work out at the gym, the cost. So I'm putting together these models, right, that are learning from what people actually do. So I look at surveys and things like that to study how people travel, what influences their decisions, what are the characteristics of those who are most likely to use electric scooters and things like that. So I look at travel behavior. I built models, and you'll hear this term model a lot, but basically what we're trying to do is to understand if we build this transportation system, how are people likely to respond? Right? If we build a new transit service, like if in Atlanta they extend what was it called, the MARTA, if they extend the MARTA services and add a new route, who's going to ride it, right? How do we adjust the price so that we can capture more, attraction to this new transportation service? So these models that I build, they help to inform designs that are put together by like city planners and decision makers. Okay. So and then this is a sort of a circuitous thing because the built environment, what they end up building is going to then impact how people travel, right? And then this is, something that I'm going to need to learn about as well. So how do people's travel patterns adjust based on the built environment? So yeah, so I'm grateful for this kind of excuse to share this because I think that for me it's a helpful way to explain like how these things are connected. So I think it ties directly to your question, but also I think I'm encouraged by this project of this researcher. I'm going to forget her name, but I think it's just an excellent project that kind of forces researchers to think about how would you visualize what I do? It's not always easy to visualize what an engineer or a scientist does. But if you can do it, if you can visualize it, then you can talk about it, you can explain it, and you can convey the importance of what you do to a broad audience.
That's good. So, do any of the scholars have any questions for Dr. Bills before we go? If not,
I
that's
have a
fine.
question.
Okay, go ahead.
So my question is, what do you think of the difference in architecture between like ancient architecture, like Romans, Greeks, and Egypt, compared to modern day architecture? And like, why did we stray so far away from like really cool big buildings with a lot of cool paintings and statues to like modern stuff?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and it's a complex question. a couple things I'll say. So one is that the way that we build buildings and also other types of public infrastructure, they are they are going to be based on the environment, right? So let me give you an example. If you think about maybe, a comparison between uh, very coastal areas and then areas that are let's see. So, if you're, let me give you a different example that's a bit more clear. So, if you think about places that are in the northern parts of the country where the weather is very cold, right? Um, in those parts of the country, you often have basements, right? Households have basements. These are places where, your furnace is going to be down there, all your main household infrastructure, your electrical box. People have like living space down there. You might have bedrooms or a gym or what have you. But then, if you think about, maybe places where it's more warm, you tend not to have basements, right? Your water heater might be in your garage, or you may not even have a furnace. Like there are places in very hot climates that don't have furnaces. So my point that I'm making is that weather and environment, they play a big role in how we design housing and infrastructure. But the other thing is, culture, right? So, culture, I'll say culture, and I'll leave it at that, even though there are many more things I can talk about. So culturally, you have certain areas where, it is a part of the culture for everyone to have their own house. So you have more single family housing, right? Um, this is also tied to density, but the reality is that places where you want there to be more single family living, you build more single family housing. Places where you expect for people are going to live closer together, like in apartments and townhouses and other complex, you build more multi-family developments. So I hope that answers your questions. There's a lot about environment as well as culture and the living conditions that people desire that goes into how we build infrastructure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bells. So we are going to turn it over to Dr. Watley because she is going to give us what we have been the most exciting. Well, all of it's been exciting, but the part that the kids and scholars are always excited about, the podcast recording process. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Dr. Watley.
Okay, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, first, I just want to say thank you to Dr. Bills because if y'all were listening, she talked about how important it is to translate your work and to be able to communicate about it and just how important those things are. I'll echo Dr. Williams and just saying how excited I was to meet you all in person. We did some podcast, virtual training, but I had a great time with you all, along with Miss Sakiwa, recording the podcast. Now, I don't have all the behind the scenes footage. If you have some, email it to me. Miss Sakiwa has some. I'm going to ask her to email it to me too, so I can make an even longer video because I just love doing things like this. And it was a lot of fun. So I would love if you have any of that information to email it to me. First, I'm going to start out just with a short little clip that's from our day of when we actually met in person. Let me see how I do that.
And while she's doing that, one of the reasons we have Dr. Watley is she is an award-winning STEM communicator.
I didn't say any of those things, yes.
And she has her own podcast, and she used to be a biologist. So she is a STEM communicator um, through the various methods. But yeah, she's an award-winning STEM communicator.
Yeah, my film just won an award, a planetarium film. I think I was talking to you all about it when we met in person, but yeah, it just won an award last week, so very exciting.
Mhm.
Um, okay, can you see this window?
Yes.
Hopefully this window only. Um, yes, okay. I got the thumbs up. So this is a very short clip. Oh, can you hear? Did you hear
No.
any music when I just did that? Okay,
No.
No.
one more thing I need to do. Uh, share settings. Now, y'all told me how to do this before to share my sound, to make sure my sound, share computer sound. All right, let's just try one more time.
Yes.
Come along with me for a day of podcasting. So today I worked with SEM Link, which brings science, engineering, and math to students in the Atlanta metro area. And students from their journal club came here to Constellations to record a podcast. Check it out.
Sour Patch.
Okay, what's your favorite kind?
Yo, I love chocolate.
Alright, me too. I love Sour Patch the most.
Yes, it. Something like their future, FIEC, something like that.
Yeah, the FIEC, the Future Immersive Entertainment Concept.
Exactly. So it's like they're working on a project that immerses you into the game without the need of a VR headset.
Hi, I'm Zaria Quinn, a homeschool and dual enrollment student in Byron, Georgia. Today, we'll be talking about a paper that caught my attention.
And I'm Anaya Quinn, a homeschooled teen from Byron, Georgia. We're going to be talking about a research article that dives into how AI is being used in the classrooms. But I think some teenagers like us should give our perspective on what we're being taught.
Hey, I'm Ashton, aka ABA Superfly. I'm from Peachtree City, Georgia, and I think you should ask yourselves whether AI could make a slice of chocolate cake, because I think that way you could get a real understanding of what today we're about to talk about, you know?
So, today, we're going to be talking about a study called Using Generative Artificial Intelligence Creatively in the Classroom.
Okay, that's just our little behind the scenes snippet. I want to just say for folks who are in the room, like, I think one of the things that people underestimate, they think, oh, when you record a podcast, you just get on a mic and talk. And I think what the students quickly realize is that they had to both hold the information they knew, they had practiced with scripts, but also they didn't want to sound too stiff. And so some of them had more of like a news anchor kind of style, and some of them had like a laid back conversational style. And also the mic picks up everything. So they couldn't flip through their papers. They wanted to think through what they were saying. And I think they did it so beautifully. And so if you haven't recorded yourself and had to listen to yourself back or tried to get a point across for a long period of time, I think it can be hard to capture just how difficult it is to take what you know and make sure it's still interesting to folks. And I think they did that beautifully. And I was so proud. So I'm going to do a clip from each group, a very short clip so I don't give away everything that they have that'll come out. And let's see. So I have like a 1-minute clip from each group. Now, these were not video podcasts. These were audio podcasts, but I couldn't resist having a little fun with the production at the end. So I did put a little video with it. So I'm going to share that. So first up is our group that I think this is olfaction that's going to come up first for us.
You know, there are companies that are already using scent or our olfaction, which is our sense of smell, to make a game more immersive. Think about like a VR headset, like, you know, Oculus Rift. So certain games with certain headsets, what they'll do is, depending on the environment you're in the game, the headset will release a scent that's based on the environment you're in to make it more immersive. Like, say you're walking through a forest and you smell something like woody, like pine. Like, that's an example of how they would release a scent so that you can be more immersed into that environment.
Yeah, I've heard of something like that before. I remember one time I was playing a VR game and they took my sense of smell and they actually used it to bring what I was seeing to life and help me realize what I was in.
Okay, that's our first clip. I'm going to do one more. Let's see if I can. I might have to stop sharing and share again. Our second clip is from AI, and then I have one more thing I want to say after that. Let me see if I can share.
So what are you guys' opinions in school with AI? Do you guys feel like it's helping or hindering kids?
I feel like that it's half helping, half hindering. It just really depends on how you use it. Like I say, if you use the guidelines, if you use it to actually help you instead of do all of your answers and research for you, then you're gonna get far. But if you don't, then you're gonna take a few steps back. You're gonna hinder yourself. You can't really expect to even do good on a test if you're using AI to do all the answers.
Yeah, and I know I go to dual enrollment school, and you go to Peachtree City.
Yes.
So how would you say you and your classmates handle AI and technology in your homework?
Well, in my school, they try to limit it by limiting the usage of our classmates' computers, phones, so they can't really access it. So really, we gotta just like come up with our own answers to things, you know, original thoughts.
What about when you get home and you have homework? Are you allowed to use like AI then?
Well, no one's well, except for like maybe our folks, but no one's really stopped us from doing that. But me personally, I don't. I just try to do it the best I can with my head.
I agree. I try to do it with my head as well.
Okay, those were some short clips, and I just want to say I chose clips that I felt like were accessible. One of the things that I really loved that you all did so well is not only did you break down the science that was in the journal articles, you really took to heart the things we talked about, like the hook and anchoring in what your audience may already know about or be curious about. And so what you really did is say, how can I take this piece of research and anchor it into day-to-day life for someone? And I think this is exactly what Dr. Bills was talking about when you talk about the olfaction study that talked about essential oils and mailing that out during COVID and how that would be useful. They then brought that in to talk about gaming and how that could be useful when you're using VR. And similarly for AI and talking about AI in the classroom, they looked at their own experiences. And I was actually surprised to find, what you all thought about AI. You got some bad press out there for your generation around AI. And so it was really refreshing to hear from you all and to see how you didn't buckle under pressure and you wanted to take multiple takes to make sure you got it right. And you really just responded and played off of each other, which is a skill that a lot of people don't have. And so I hope you continue to nurture that. And I can't wait to send you an email when those published episodes are up and available to listen.
Do you have an idea on when they may be up?
Yeah, they could be up ideally by the end of next week. I know I could probably do it a little sooner, but I've been trying to not overpromise. But by the end of next week, they should be up. I think I have very minimal editing to do. You all were clear in the mics. And so it was hard to choose the pieces that I was going to share today. I didn't know how much time I would have. And so I said, I better make it short. But I am excited about them. Also, if you want to send any, I don't know if I'm able to do it. I'll ask Ms. Takiwa if we wanted to include any of the photos of the group photo to show along with the actual podcast episode. That could be cool artwork. So we can figure those things out.
Okay. And also, is it going to be on Spotify?
Yes.
Yes. We have a whole podcast.
They have a whole channel.
I was going to ask what's the name of the channel because I forgot to look it up.
It's SEM Explained. SEM and Explained. And your podcast episodes going up there with the other cohorts.
Yes.
Okay.
So you all are officially STEM podcasters.
Thank you for recording the podcast.
It's a pretty cool experience. I definitely do it again. It was
a lot more fun than I expected. I don't do podcasts a lot. Definitely like got me out of my comfort zone. Like I am a bit of a presenter. Sometimes I do public speaking, but I never done a podcast before. So that was different. And being
Yeah.
able to incorporate
Yeah.
what we learned from journal articles, it's like you actually had to not study a script, but study something scientific and then talk about it. So that was pretty
Yeah,
cool.
and
Yeah.
we got to do fun articles too, which was really cool.
And that's why we let you choose your own, because from
Yeah.
what Dr. Wiley knows, as her, being a STEM podcaster, it's a lot easier to communicate with something you're actually interested in and have a passion about and want to discuss. You can tell the difference um, between the podcasters who, they joke and say podcast equipment should be more expensive. Because there's some people it's not genuine. They're trying to get clickbaits versus people that are using podcasts as a tool to communicate their genuine thoughts, things they're passionate about, things that are important to them. So yeah, I'm excited. And I think also that Dr. Watley told me, and we don't have a date for this because this is something extra she wants to do, that at some point your experience may be on our YouTube channel behind the scenes.
Yes. I think we can.
I'm just
I
gonna
have
go
been,
ahead and give you the password, girl, because
yes, I've been pushing Mr. Kiwa. I mean, there was some great footage there. And I think, like we said, podcasting is super accessible, but there are also people who stream where things are visual. And I think, imagine if somebody saw your experience, just like you didn't know how exciting it would be and you weren't sure if it was for you, you can then be that spark of inspiration for somebody else to try something like this.
What is the YouTube channel for SEMlink?
oh, you asking a hard question. It's on. It is, if you follow us on Instagram, it is in our Instagram link. So we
What
are,
is your
The bio.
Instagram name?
yeah, bio, at SEM link.
At SEM Link.
Hmm.
Okay.
The
And if you,
podcast channel is there in the YouTube. Yeah.
mhm.
And if I do what?
I think the only other thing I was going to say, if you all find that you're continuing this or you want to continue doing podcasting, you know how to reach me. I think what Mr. Kiwa and SEM Link have provided is a great opening opening the door for you to have skills that you see even with Dr. Bill's art is so necessary, and you continue to hone those things. And so please keep us posted if you do continue to do this type of work or anything similar.
Mhm. And thank you so much, Dr. Watley, because I just listen to podcasts. And so when I started through the podcast, the first year we tried to do it on our own. And I was like, no, 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 no. Like, we cannot do this. And so bringing in, a STEM communicator and then bringing in you, because we've had other STEM communicators, but I do think that it's important, like we're role modeling, like this is a diverse program, but as you see, who dwindled down, right? To
Mm-hmm.
have somebody who looks like you, helping you and guiding through your process is really, really important. And it connects to our whole mission, right? Connecting to the STEM community and positive role models. And so I hope that you all continue on with your podcast journey. I was having fun. And so I hope it inspired you to do that and also taught you how to communicate science, to the person on the corner or if your parents are interested in science. And so I am so excited. I can't wait to hear your podcast. I'm gonna be listening for the first time like yeah. Dr.
Yeah.
Watt didn't give me any previews.
No.
So thank you so much. So I want to say like a first few closing words. Let me see before as we close. Um, First of all, this program would not be possible without the support of Simon's Foundation. They are the sole funder of our program, and they believe that science communication is so important that they write a check so that we can do this for you. And so um, it is free to you, but it's not free. And we are so thankful for the Simons Foundation support and they have been checking on throughout. They have been excited about the progress. And I think the program officer listens to the podcast, and um, they talk about the journal articles, but whenever I've seen them talk about the program, they talk about the podcast and how the students record a podcast and you become STEM podcasters. And so I like the journal part, but the podcast is the general part, because if you can communicate STEM to the general public, you can communicate it to your peers. Um, Secondly, I do want to thank Dr. Williams and Dr. Watley for their contribution and helping with the curriculum, because, I had the idea for it, but I'm not a podcaster and I don't read journal articles like that. And so helping identify some of the STEM researchers, knowing that we wanted, it's easy. I'm an engineer. Dr. Williams is, I don't know if he calls himself a biologist. I call him a biologist because I don't understand all of the different fields in biology. But we could have easily said we're just gonna have engineers and biologists. But we were very intentional about exposing you to the diversity of STEM professionals and researchers, and being intentional about making sure that we had researchers that could talk to you. That's why I think in one of the articles we were discussing in the earlier sessions, you all were saying, I don't understand it. And I was like, I don't understand it either. I think it was like astrophysics or something. And the key is you don't always have to understand all the science that you're reading, but you have to learn how to gather whatever information you have. And sometimes when you're reading journal articles or reading in general, especially like in your textbook, you have more questions than answers. And some of it is learning how to ask the right questions so that you can get more knowledge and inquire your knowledge. And then I want to thank all of the guest lecturers that sent in articles. I think everybody sent in their article of research they were doing. And if it wasn't their particular article, because I want to say, I think somebody sent somebody else's article because another research group published before they could. And that's like an important lesson in journal writing, right? Like somebody's beat you to the publication, even though you're doing something similar. And so thankful for all of that. And then thankful for you all and your parents. You have done the journey. You have spent Thursday afternoons discussing journal articles. You have read journal articles. Do you know how like dope that is for high school students? Like we didn't send you watered down high school journal articles. We sent you journal articles from peer-reviewed publications. And so you all tackled it. You had great discussions about it. And even if you didn't understand everything, which is fine, because some of those journal articles were hard. I was like, dang, like, I am not smart. This is smart. You all tackled it. You asked questions. You had insightful dialogue, and that is an important skill to have. And so I'm going to do a plug. Although you all have successfully done cohort 6, we're going to have another cohort. So tell your friends that the journal club is happening and what you learned so much. And when the application opens in mid-July, tell them to apply so we can continue on. And another thing, at some point, we are going to have a social with all the cohorts. So look for that date. And then I'm also going to try to reschedule your brunch, because y'all got busy schedules and most of y'all weren't available May 2nd. And I'm just like, what? So I do want to celebrate you all in person, but I didn't want to have you all choose between something else, because this is to celebrate you all completing this program. All right. So do Dr. Wiley or Dr. Williams have any remarks, or any students have any remarks before we go? Zaria?
Thank you for hosting the cohort. It was a really interesting experience and we learned a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity.
You're welcome. And you all can put this on your resume. And you can go ahead and tell people y'all are STEM podcasters. And in what, a little over a week, Dr. Wiley, they'll have the evidence to prove it, right?
That's right.
All right. Well, thank you so much for those who have shown up for these students. I'm a firm believer that students become STEM professionals when they see it. And so you all have been great role models. And I also want to send a special thank you to Tara. People are like, why you bring a librarian in and why she keep coming? I'm like, first of all, librarians are important. I'm on the advisory board of my public library, but in the age of internet, we can get it off our phone. We forget the importance of going to the library and using the resources of the library and how it is the reliable source of information and knowledge that we know is accurate, right? And so thank you so much, Tara, for coming every year and showing us about reliable resources and how we can use the library. Because I think people forget we can get so much on our phones and apps that we forget like the library exists and that they do have some tools we can use at home so we don't always have to go into the physical library. So thank you so much, everyone, for supporting these young scholars. Young scholars, I will see you all soon. Good luck on your finals and enjoy your summer. And we'll figure out a date to celebrate you during brunch. Like we'll try to coordinate it because y'all, y'all got some busy schedules.
Okay, thank you. See you guys later.
All right. Have a
All
good
right.
evening, everyone.
Thank you guys.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.